don't know if you guys know this, but there's one thing I've learned about devs, and it's that devs love bike shedding. So let's find out what happens. Apparently, Rust, at least as the headline says, Rust maintainer promises to do everything I can to stop the Rust for Linux project. So we're going to go through a nice little classic mail thread here and see what's going on in the old let's just go check out what's happening in the old Linux community. All right, let's see. So it starts off with no Rust code in the kernel DMA, please. Okay, that seems they don't just want it there. Okay, so that's by Christopher Hellwig. So I assume Christopher Hellwig is going to be the will be the one that doesn't want Rust in, right? That's okay. We can just assume that's that. What do you suggest? Thanks. Okay, that's that. Miguel, nice little thing. Okay. Hellwig, let's see, what does he have to say? Keep the wrappers in your code instead of making life painful for others. Okay. I think I understand this. Oh, what does your code mean? Duplicated in every driver? Otherwise, Rust kernel DMA RS seems reasonable. No. Yes, interfaces to the DMA API should stay in readable C code and not in weird bindings, so that it remains. It must be remains. So that it remains greppable and maintainable. You know, I think there's something that's probably hard for a lot of us, youngins to understand, which is that some people use grep to navigate through a code base, and that's it. Right? Like, I'm so, real. It's real. Yeah. I think a lot of people are very, very used to LSPs and the ubiquity of LSPs. And so this whole go to definition thing is a relatively new aspect of coding. I know that kind of feels strange, maybe to a lot of people, which a lot of people probably don't realize how new LSPs are not since the 90s, my friend. LSPs are nowhere even close since the 90s. LSPs are relatively new, but they're still, what is it, 2015, 2014? So it's like they're about 10 years old, the open source LSPs. Now, C tags existed beforehand. C tags were generally how people navigated before this. And then there was also this whole idea of, like NetBeans and these bigger things building autocompletes around Java and various other ones. And kind of this whole idea of autocomplete and IntelliSense was definitely starting in the 90s. But what people do is that people, like, there's a large part of a contingent of older developers that purely rely on grep as a means of navigation. I think that is, it's amazing. It's amazing to me, at least. I use grep. I refuse to use anything new. I don't think it's necessarily that. I think that when you have a project, so to be in defense of this, when you have a project that has very strict, coding standards, and if anybody here's ever tried to use an LSP on large C++ projects, I've never had one actually work consistently, especially when it comes to macros. I can't seem to get it to work well. And so, if you've ever been a part of this whole, it's a nightmare for some people claim that it's easy. I've yet to ever actually make it fully work. And this is either in C or C++. So I'm not dogging this guy, but if you have a project that's been very heavily crafted as far as what people and how people write code, there's actually something to be said about the grepability of code. It's actually kind of a neat aspect of the whole life. And so, LSPs are pretty useless in C/C++ projects. Rolf, show an editor that can find all the different relations of a function across all possible build combinations. I know. Like, people don't realize some of the complexities when it comes to what ClangD and any of these C++ styled LSPs are attempting to do. It's actually very impressive and difficult what is going on underneath the hood. All right, anyways, so I just wanted to give I at least minimally wanted to give this guy a little bit of defense here, which is, I'm sure this Chris Hellwig fella is probably or these people fighting against Rust in the kernel have probably been developing Linux for like 20 years. And so for them, a new language and adding a new language actually means maintenance in something they don't know, and they're not sure if the people maintaining it are going to be around. I think that's the general feel of this. I know a lot of people are just like, Oh, no, they're just gatekeeping. Well, I'm not 100% sure on the gatekeeping and all that. I'm not sure if it's fear of change, right? You also got to remember that if you've been developing a project for 20 years and people that have never been a part of a project come in and say, oh, this language is much better, we got to use this one. You could imagine that some of the newcomers kind of rub these people that have been around in it for 20 years on the wrong side, right? I just don't think searchability is a good reason. I'm on your team. I'm on your team. I do think grepability as the argument is not really a great argument. But to be completely fair, I think there's a lot of fear that these people coming in aren't going to be there in 10 years maintaining the stuff. And then somebody else has to take on the cost of maintenance. And so when he says maintainability, what I think he's saying is, I don't trust that the people who are writing this are going to be around supporting this for the next 20 years. So that's my guess. I could be wrong. Anyways, let's keep on going. So I'm just trying to give like at least a reasonable defense of this person, because I think people probably read these headlines and think this guy's just being a jerk. Maybe there's something more to it. Maybe he's just trying to be a jerk though. C devs will die off eventually. Well, no, what? I mean, first off, that's a crazy way to look at a project. Second off, there's plenty of C devs left. There's young people that know C as well. I mean, eventually you're going to die, right? Rust drivers shouldn't use C APIs directly, but rather use an abstraction of the corresponding C API. For one reason, one reason for that is that some requirements C APIs naturally have can be abstracted in a way that the Rust compiler already ensures certain things, and hence drivers have less potential to produce errors. I understand this is very abstract, and we can go into details and examples if you like. So, in the end, Rust drivers should end up with each of them including a copy of those abstractions, rather than using the C APIs from all over the place within the driver. This wouldn't help with what you ask for. It would just duplicate the problem. If you don't feel comfortable maintaining the Rust abstraction, or just don't want to, that's fine. I don't think anyone expects you to do that. We can take care of that instead. From your perspective, I think you can just think of the Rust abstraction as a single driver calling into the DMA API. Okay, so this guy is arguing, who's this person? This is Danilo. He's arguing that Rust should effectively duplicate all of the stuff required because Rust doesn't have the same dangers and footguns of C. Am I effectively getting that correctly? And he's kind of doing this like, to me, how I read this is like trying to be an ambassador on the C side that's trying to be really nice, but also saying, piss off Rust, without saying it in a nice way, or with saying it in a nice way. Is that what I'm reading? Am I reading this correctly? He's not saying, he is not saying that that must be duplicated. Let's see. Don't force me to deal with your shiny language of the day. Maintaining multi-language projects is a pain. I have no interest in dealing with. If you want to use something that's not C, be that assembly or Rust, you write to C interfaces and deal with the impedance mismatch yourself, as far as I'm concerned. I just don't see how Linux and Rust, who was it that wrote? There's somebody that wrote like, hey, I'm leaving the whole kernel development. I'm done with this whole thing. Rust is impossible to get inside the kernel development. I think it's going to always be impeded. To me, it just seems like this is an impossible project. One of the things that article said was, why don't they just fork it? Forking is really the only path forward, is to fork it and force like Rust to be in the way they want. One, I just can't imagine Linux, effectively Linux, right? Linux RS. Oh, we forking it. Yeah. Or just a full rewrite. I know, but a full rewrite is like virtually impossible, right? Or not virtually impossible. It would just be very hard to get all the level of requirements in to be like you already have all the legacy and all the stuff already in Linux, and then you could start replacing the wheels and stepping forward with Rust as it goes. I just can't imagine this is ever going to go forward. This is going to be the slowest project of all time. I don't think people realize that getting Rust in the Linux kernel, this is going to be like a 2-decade-long project. Like someone said, I think Null Addict, you said it, eventually C devs die. Well, so eventually also Rust devs die. And so to me, it just seems like it's going to be like you have to effectively keep slowly pushing until everybody that's contributing has died or can no longer program. Which just seems like a pretty crazy, like this is like a generational project. Like we're in this for 2 generations, boys. Here we go. I think it's fair to include Rust as long as it's behind C ABI abstractions. Okay, I think that's fair low-level TV. This will be impossible to get everyone on board. You either need to keep it C only, or you need to lose a lot of maintainers. And personally, I'd prefer to keep the maintainers. There's a lot of localized knowledge there. It's very, very true. Like, people do forget how much, like, anyone that's worked in a large company understands this idea of tribal knowledge. And to pretend like you can just replace people out, like engineers are replaceable, is like such a crazy, crazy, crazy thing to think of. Make your own Linux and Rust with blackjack and hookers. Yep, that's generally the plan. Anyways, so we'll just keep on going down this whole rabbit hole here because so it looks like, okay, so Danilo is saying, so this must be the pro Rust guy, right? Is this the pro Rust guy saying that he would just create different drivers for Rust that correspond to proper Rust kind of things that they don't need to worry about? I think that's what I'm actually trying to read here. All right, let's keep on going. Let's try to understand this. Don't force me to deal with your shiny language again. Again, no one asked you to deal or maintain this piece of Rust code. Okay. Let's see. This is exactly what we're doing and proposing here, isn't it? We wrote a single piece of Rust code that abstracts the C API for all Rust drivers, which we offer to maintain ourselves. What else are you asking for? Okay, I understand it now. This makes sense. So effectively, he's saying that he's gonna have the own Rust interface that does not look like the C interface, that might interact with the C interface, or maybe it's separate from the C interface. Since there hasn't been a reply so far, I'm assuming we're good with maintaining the DMA Rust abstractions separately. Hence, the next version of this patch series will have the corresponding maintainer entry. All right, here we go. We're going forward with Rust. Rust is going. Oh man, this is look at this sweet bike shed going on. Have you ever seen something? This is so good. This is crazy. We forget like how much effort has to go in to maintaining Linux. It's really wild how much actually goes in underneath the hood. And all I do is I use 2404 Jammy, and like that's it. I don't even think about any of these things, right? You skipped like 3 emails, or maybe I'm crazy. No, I've gone each one, right? Oh, did I miss Robin? Oh, I did miss. Oh, my bad. Robin, my bad. Indeed. For what it's worth, it seems like the appropriate level of abstractions to me, judging by the other wrappers living in the Rust kernel already. As far as interaction with C goes, it appears to be pretty straightforward mid-layer consumer of the DMA API, much like others we already have. Video Buff 2, DMA Star, so all these ones. Just one which happens to be a language binding rather than some other kind of functionality abstraction. There is a realistic chance that the C API will evolve in ways which break the bindings. But as long as A, that won't break non-Rust builds, and B, Rust folks are happy to take responsibility for unbreaking the Rust build if and when it happens, and then that seems reasonable in my opinion. So so I think what Robin's proposing is that, yeah, these things can exist, but the Rust side has to be constantly on the defense. So when someone changes the API, the Rust side has to be a fast follower. Now, I've been in a position where this exact thing has happened, where I was a fast follower to APIs being changed on a separate team. And I will tell you this one, I've never had more headaches and more sadness in my life than when I was effectively subjugated to other people's changing software, and I had to maintain and make sure I always kept up. It is miserable. It is not fun. It is not a good time. This is not what you should never want this. That position is not stressful at all. It's super easy, barely an inconvenience, right? Dude, it's awful. It's an awful vibe, and I really, truly dislike it. We have that at our company. It sucks. Yeah, it truly is. I still remember to this day getting a call from customer service being like, excuse me, the application has broken. We have a couple tax documents that are not displaying correctly. Could you please take a look at that? You must have broken it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I broke production. Oh my gosh. I broke production at a tax company. Oh my gosh. So of course, what do? I open it up and check it out. Okay, what did we do? Oh, we only updated our underlying server version of our kerning module. Oh, crazy. That's weird. It was only a minor version upgrade. Why did the minor version upgrade completely break production? That doesn't make any sense. Go and look into it. What they did is that they decided to add sane defaults, but sane defaults for them, for their testing platform, not for me. So, of course, what does that mean? It means it broke a whole bunch of stuff, but they're saying it was only a minor version change, which should theoretically be safe. So I go to the owner and I say, hey, okay, help me out here because we're using semantic versioning, and this was a minor change, but it broke everything. Why was this a minor change? You're changing the contract. And he said, no, we only made an additive change. We did not make a major change. We didn't change anything. And I'm like, no, but you did. You changed the default behavior. That's a major change. And they said, no, that's not, we don't think that's a major change. That's a minor change. And I still remember to this day going, oh God, oh my beautiful Lord Jesus, I need help not to yell because I'm about to like freak out. I'm about to like go flip a table and throw a computer. So I need to like, sorry everybody, I'm going to go to church for a little while. I got to go find a confessional. I've never been in one, but here we go. We're going to go. No, you can't mute. You can't mute and scream. This was 2011 or 12. I was in office talking to the person. I was looking at the windows, in the windows of their soul. We were eye to eye. I could have touched his body with my hand. Like I had to go. I had to leave because I was like, damn, this is my life now. This is my life now. And so from there on out, every single time we updated that module, I had to play the game of what broke, because semantic versioning doesn't mean the same thing between us two. Semantic versioning means something different for them. And I probably had 50 separate little breaks that were absolutely mind-boggling and always resulted in production breaking because we just couldn't catch them all. Okay? These were the impossible Pokemon. Classic semantic mismatch. I know. The problem with semantic versioning is that there's not a concrete definition on semantic versioning. So even when I say that's not a minor, they say, no, it is a minor. It's just like, well, I guess we're just mismatched. Whoopsies. Anyways, you really are describing the life of a data engineer. Yeah, exactly. It really sucks to be in these positions. So when I hear this, I actually feel really bad for Danilo. I don't think I'm saying his name right, but Danilo, because it is really difficult. Like, this is a very tough position to be in, especially when the people on the other side can give they give zero care about you. It's actually very difficult. Like, if they care for you and they want things to work out, then yeah, it's a lot easier at least. At least, like, things can happen, but it's not. It's difficult. It's hard. All right, let's see what we got here. Surely you can expect maintainers of the Rust abstraction to help with integrating API changes. This isn't different compared to driver component maintainers helping with integrating fundamental API changes for their affected driver/component, like you mentioned, video 2 buff DMA stuff. At last year's LPC, I held a talk, about Rust in the Linux kernel, and there was a question at the end where I was asked how I think about cases where Rust abstractions break caused C API changes. My answer was that I'm not too concerned about this. We can rely on what already happens every day in kernel development. People work together and collaborate. There's a lot of very core components that are widely used, and depending on the complexity of the change, may require the help of the users to integrate changes. So I don't think with Rust abstractions we're adding anything that kernel does not already has a strategy to deal with. Okay, I see what he's saying, yeah. So in other words, just when something breaks as the C API maintainers change in the Rust world, just like, let's work together. I think that's a pretty, I would say that's like a pretty nice answer. Like, hey, we'll just work together. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. We could totally just do this together. Like, hey, you got some changes, you got some breakage, hit me with the email. Again, I still feel bad for the C people because I think a lot of the C people, how they're viewing it is that if this guy quits or whoever's maintaining that part of the Rust driver quits, then it's like, who's going to take that over? Whereas if it's in C, they could effectively go, okay, hey, boys, let's put our head together. We can kind of fix it, and we'll have to gain the core knowledge for this. And so I think I'm understanding some of the arguments, at least in that kind of sense. But yeah, this Danilo guy seems really, really like nice about everything. All right, I think we know that an API change is in the works. We should try to anticipate that and not add another complex user of a feature that's likely going to disappear. For DMA API, I guess the big thing is the DMA/page split that's been talked about since forever, instead of mixing it all up into the scatter list structure. But with Rust abstractions, it should be pretty easy to make sure the Rust side interface is really clean here. And so any refactoring limited to just the mid layer. Plus, this patch here is not even close to tackling the SG-based DMA API parts. Same applies for the Rust wrapping DMA buff interfaces. That's just more of the same. Okay, SEMA balls. Yeah, on your chin. So again, everything's seeming, I think they're all agreeing that this shouldn't be too hard. We already got this. Everything's looking good, easy. The scatter list portion of the DMA bindings are in the pipeline. The idea was to start up. Okay, so this is kind of talk about the scatter list, is my guess. This will be just like another scatter list. Oh, I just realized you're working on the scatter list stuff. Well, indeed, come in handy. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, Hellwig's back in. So Hellwig tends to be the largest antagonist towards Rust so far. No, I'm not. This was explicit. Since there hasn't been a reply, I assume we're good with this. No, I'm not. Okay, no, I'm not. This was explicit. Knacked by Christopher Hellwig. Also, negative acknowledgement by this. And I also do not want another maintainer. If you want to make Linux impossible to maintain due to the cross-language code base, do that in your driver so that you have to do it instead of spreading this cancer to core subsystems, where this cancer explicitly is cross-language code base and not Rust itself, just to escape the Flame War Brigade. Okay, well, I mean, okay, so his argument truly is he does not want any part of the code base to be a dual language experience. Because he even does explicitly say the cancer is not Rust. It's two languages, single part of the code base. At least he's clear. At least he's being clear on these things. Oh man, here we go. Bike shed to the maximum. We're about the bike shed to the maximum. Here it comes. Let's see. I accept that you do not want to be involved with Rust in the kernel, which is why I offered to maintain the Rust abstraction layer for the DMA coherent allocator as a separate component, which it would be anyways ourselves. As explained previously, this component is just a user of the DMA coherent allocator API, just like any other driver. And the reason we want this component is because otherwise this abstraction layer would end up in every Rust driver that needs the DMA coherent allocator as duplicated code, which for obvious reason isn't desirable. Throughout this conversation, I did not see technical arguments or concerns against this, but I did recognize your opposition against Rust in the kernel and cross-language projects. Being a maintainer myself, I think it is an outside the scope of maintainer to restrict the usage of public kernel API for a certain entity arbitrarily and or by personal preference, which, as it appears to me, is the case here. Also fair. So I think the cross-language argument is very fair, but I also think that this is truly fair, which is that, sorry, just because you don't like it doesn't mean you could say it, because there's no technical argument being made here other than you just don't want to have to deal with it. Okay. I mean, his arguments are very good and technical, right? Which is like, I can imagine this duplicated code would be a horrible, horrible experience as more and more drivers, right? Because there's probably, I know, by the way, Greg and Linus are being called here. So we've gone all the way up the food chain on this one. All right, so we got Christopher again, which doesn't help. Let's see, hold on. Let's see. I accept that you don't want to be involved in the Rust kernel, which is why we offered to maintain the abstraction layer. Okay, so it's that one, which doesn't help me a bit. Every additional bit that another language creeps in drastically reduces the maintainability of the kernel as an integrated project. The only reason Linux managed to survive so long is by not having internal boundaries, and adding another language completely breaks this. You might not like my answer, but I will do everything I can to stop this. This is not because I hate Rust. While not my favorite language, it's definitely one of the best new ones, and I've encouraged people to use it for new projects where it fits. I do not want it anywhere near a huge C code base that I need to maintain. So here's the problem. Every time I read each one of their arguments, I feel like I side with them. Like, this guy is even saying that he thinks it's a great language. So it looks like he doesn't even, the opposition truly is about not wanting to have boundaries, not wanting to have to do that. I know Zig, by the way, poor Zig. Zig would have been such a great fit in this, because then it's just like you don't even have to think about it. It just happens. This actually feels like a reasonable argument more and more, which is that it's not a technical argument. It's a personnel argument. It's that it's the hardest of all problems, which is it's a communication around software problem. Nah, he's behaving like he's the only maintainer of the kernel. Joao, I'm not sure if that's true. I think what he's saying is that the reason why it's successful is that all maintainers are working in a single uniform project. And so that way, as if anything breaks, theoretically, other maintainers can come in and help. I think that's like I think that's the point. I think that's the argument he's attempting to make. Unification is huge. Yeah. I think people are discounting how good unification is. Zig Evangelist never fails to shill their new language. It's not even 1.0 yet. Of course. What, dude, what isn't this how all language evangelists are? Like, what are you saying? What kind of, you're not adding to the conversation here. Okay, so I think I totally am on his team, but I'm actually completely on Danilo's team as well, right? I'm actually like, just so everybody knows, I'm actually pro Rust when it comes to kernel development. And the reason why is that I think Team Fence, dude, I'm on Team Fence. I can actually see both of these, but like the reason why is that it's actually pretty simple in my mind, which is that you want zero possibilities of not mem leaks. You can leak memory in Rust. People have to quit saying that. I want zero possibilities of of like memory related security stuff. Like I think it's actually reasonable to say that Rust actually has a really good advantage in no, stop saying bug free. Stop it. There's no use after freeze. Like there's a lot of communication in Rust that's very, very good. Right? And I think we can all agree to that. I am not the biggest Rust proponent, but I can minimally say that I think it's actually it's pretty good for this type of, it's at least a reasonably good language for this type of thing to prevent an entire series of problems. Right? I would rather use Zig, and I think Zig would be better than C for kernels while not having Rust. I actually think Zig is great. Okay, again, shut up. But I think that Rust could actually be probably better for this situation. You know, just being real here. I think Rust is likely the better one. You know, it just is. Anyways, but I think I agree mostly with this take here that it's the uniformity of the project is what gives it a lot of its strength. And by having non-uniform project, there is some level of friction that you're adding regardless of how you feel. Because I know Danilo's saying, oh, we'll maintain it, don't worry. But remember, when someone says they will maintain it, you must understand that that means when you have a problem, you have to find a maintainer. Then finding a maintainer, you have to get them up to speed on what's happening. And then when they're up to speed on what's happening, they then have to come and help and fix the problem. It's not nearly as swift or as smooth as people are thinking. This is not like 30-minute quick conversation. Hey, buddy, there's a problem right here. Okay, done, cool. Right? My guess is it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot slower paced. There's a lot more rough edges to it. I'm curious what Linus has to say. He ain't maintaining shit for 30 years. Exactly. Some of these people are 30 years into maintaining, 40 years into maintaining Linux, and they just don't want this. AI will solve this. People know how to trigger me so good. They're so good at it. It's actually shocking how good you guys are at getting me to get shocked. All right, we're almost getting up to Greg. So Greg's about to get in on this one. Let's just see where we're going first. All right, I do acknowledge your reservations about the possible maintenance burden due to the introduction of Rust or another language consumer of the DMA API, but I was hoping that we could arrive at some sort of common ground. If this Rust middle layer abstraction is unacceptable to you, could you perhaps suggest a solution so that all Rust device drivers don't end up with redundant DMA coherent allocator Rust code? Could the Rust team do something about it? Great response here. Love the response. Good response here. The common ground is that I have absolutely no interest in helping to spread the multi-language code base. I absolutely support using Rust in new code bases, but I do not at all in Linux. Thank you for your understanding. Okay, well there we are. Record set straight. So I'm curious. I'm actually really curious how Greg responds to this, because this has long left a software engineering problem and now has officially hit a people problem, and we're in deadlock. Okay. We're in deadlock. So I'm curious actually how he gets there and does this. So we're going to keep on going because we have to go to Philip, I think, or to Jason. I can't tell where. I'm going to just jump over to here, and we're just going to go from here, okay? All right, Jason. Let's see. Would some sort of official statement by the entire community reassure you that the burden of keeping Rust abstractions working with any changes on the C side rests entirely on the Rust side's shoulders? Because that's what the statement made by the latter seemed to mean to me. As I see it, at least as long as the Rust code is just drivers and abstractions, we sit on top of the core infrastructure, which is in C, breakages or hypothetically unmaintainability would only affect the Rust side, whereas the traditional kernel could go on working and being maintained as it always did. I'm thinking about something like Linux languages file, which specifies the languages you can use and what the rules are, written down transparently black on white as a counterpart to the Linux licenses, basically. Okay, so formal adherence. Okay, so now we're about to, it's actually a good idea. It is a good idea, right? This is where and how we do things. That's it. Let's at least get a formal statement, which I actually largely agree with that style. All right, so we're about to get into the head honcho coming in here. All right. You'd have to reconcile that with the recent event where Linus deferred the pull request and some C patches were dropped because of the Rust K build bugs. It seems to me that the message is now crystal clear and the opposite of what you claim. All PRs to Linus must not break the Rust build, and the responsibility for that falls on all maintainers. If the Rust team is not quick enough to resolve any issue during the development window, then patches must be dropped before sending PRs, or Linus will refuse the PR. Effectively, this seems to imply that patches changing some of the C API cannot be merged by maintainers unless accompanied by matching Rust hunks. I know hunks is a term in Git, okay? I understand that, but it's much more fun to say it the other way, okay? Can we just all agree? There's just we need some Rust hunks in here. If there are different instructions to maintainers, I would be interested to know. Thus, I would not describe the situation as rest entirely on the Rust side's shoulders. Regardless, it seems to be where we are now, and I have it on my list to follow Andrew and get some Rust compiler set up. Okay, so I see what's happening here. What he's trying to say is that Linus is actually enforcing that Rust must maintain parity. There is no possibility of any PR or patch making it in without everything working. So it sounds like from the Linus side, from top down, Linus is attempting to enforce that these guys need to figure out how to play together, not enforcing how they need to play together. Am I getting, I believe I'm getting that correct, which is that he's allowing freedom and responsibility. They need to figure out the lines. They need to figure out how to organize themselves. It's not up to Linus, but that they need to always maintain the idea that no matter what they do, Rust has to be working. The vibe that I get. Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. They put a lot of effort on getting this maintainer on their side. He must be very important. Yeah. Though the maintenance lies on the shoulders of Rust maintainers, breaks down when a significant number of the drivers are written in Rust. If it comes to a conflict at this point, do you throw away these drivers in the worst case? So my guess is what's going to happen is if they continue with this one, this is kind of like my general guess of what's happening. So forgive me if I'm incorrect, but my assumption is that right now Rust does not have access. Like I don't know what the DMA part is. Okay, forgive me. Okay, and there's this coherent allocator that's going on, and so they must maintain in each one of the drivers, right? We'll just call this like a Rust driver over here. They must maintain something that interfaces with this here, and then write their driver. As opposed to what's actually being offered is they want to have a Rust middleware here such that the driver can just rely on this and not have to write its own. And so theoretically, there's going to come a point that if they don't do this, there's going to be one Rust driver with its own little allocator. There's going to be another one right here. There's going to be another one right here. And then if there's any changes to this, you're going to have like a uniform throughout the project break, which is then going to force this idea that there needs to be deeper integration. So that's kind of like my guess of what's going on here. Is that there's going to come a point where this keeping it out actually becomes untenable. Untenable? Intenable? Imtenable? Atenable. It's atenable, irretenable for it to be able to continue on because of the just like massive implications of if you change anything, it actually breaks so many things that having each one of these duplicated codes becomes impossible to maintain. My guess is this, is that whether or not this change actually goes into the core component, there's this middleware abstraction layer or whatever's happening, I don't think I think eventually it will get put in no matter what. If Linus holds down that the Rust side must be maintained at all times, by effectively allowing that forcing function to happen, you're going to force people to have to deal with it and go, okay, no one can get patches in without this being easier. We need to just make it easier. Let's put it in. Let's make it easier, right? That's like my general kind of guess here, right? But that sounds like a lot A lot of stuff. Linus hates Rust, as far as I know. I don't, as far as I can tell from all the communication, it does not appear that Linus hates Rust. It seems like Linus looks at Rust as a potentially cool idea and that he's allowing it to be integrated and put into the kernel because he sees some of the value of having such a guarantee regardless of the one. Yeah, he's the one who greenlit it, so he has to have some level of acceptance of it. So I just don't believe that. Like, I don't believe it's some hate or anything like that. All right, here we go. The Dreadlord, the captain, or no, technically, if we're going to continue this, if we're going to continue this Wheel of Time reference, Greg would actually be one of the Forsaken. Would he be Morden? I think he'd be Morden. The Nabliss. He'd be the Nabliss, right? Yeah, I think he'd be the Nabliss. All right. It seems the message is now crystal clear. All the PR is okay. That's not the case. The one you point out, at above was a tooling issue that people missed due to the holidays. Fixing it up was simple enough, and people did so and moved on. Once a core API changes in a tree and it hits the Linux next, and that blows up a Rust build, obviously people should notice it. Then the Rust maintainer developers have said they will fix it up. Oh, damn. Okay, so never mind. So Morden has officially spoken. Am I allowed? Who's Greg KH? He's the Nabliss. It's the title Nabliss is a promise to the one who will rule the world one step below the Dark One. Right. So I know I just called Linus the most evil incarnation in the universe. I'm so proud of you, Prime. Thank you, Teej. But I'm just saying, I know these things. Morden, yeah, Morden. Morden has claimed the title. So Greg is actually confirming the opposite side, which I think, personally, I think this side's crazy to me, right? This feels just so unreachable. I mean, honestly, when I read this, what it seems to me is that they're allowing Rust in just to not let him in enough, just to piss them off for them to leave and want to go right their own. Like, that's how I read that. Is that all streams flow down, everything flows from the kernel down into Linux.next, and if a Rust build breaks, Rust team has to figure it out and go fix it. Let's see. So the claim remains the same here. It's just like staging. API changes to the subsystem are allowed to break staging. And the Rust code, and maintainers do not have to fix them up there. That's up to the staging and Rust maintainer developers to do so. Thanks, Greg KH. Okay, so I think that it just makes those who want Rust into the kernel, this just really makes their job hard. Always being downstream of changes is just a hard position to be in. This is why I think people have such a hard time with front end and back end coding, is because there is not a clear up and downstream. And it seems like things are always moving in such a way that both sides believe they are, they're like the upstream, and then these changes just flow into each other and break each other. And it just becomes an impossible game of cat and FEBE is a left-right stream. It really is. It's a left-right stream. But Greg is basically agreeing with the Rust guy here. He's on the Rust guy's side. Well, there's this whole idea that, well, right here, this guy, I forget who said this, Philip, if I'm not mistaken. Do I have that incorrect? I might have that incorrect. Sorry if I have this incorrect. But Phillips just said that all PRs to Linus must not break Rust builds. And Greg is saying, no, they break Rust builds. It's okay. It's in Rust. It's in Linux staging that those things need to be dealt with. So Greg is actually agreeing with Danilo. Danilo was saying, hey, when things break, we can work together. We can fix it. All right. So Rust truly is a downstream component. Regardless of the holidays, you seem to be saying that Linus should have accepted Andrew's PR and left Rust with build failures. I'm also not sure about moved on. Euros previously accepted patches are still unmerged. Let's see, Euros has now respun a v4 without a config cc has type of unqual. Is that supposed to be unequal, but just not, or unqualitative, that triggered the Rust issue. The underlying Rust issue of mismatch compiler messing up kconfig probes looks to still be open. Let's see. So the claim that this remains the same here. It's just like staging. Okay, my reading of this paragraph makes me think that you expect Linus to have merged Andrew's PR and left the Rust build left the Rust build broken, so that the Rust maintainer developers could fix it later. JSON. I called him JSON. Okay, so I think I see this. I can't answer for Linus, sorry. But a generic, hey, this broke our working toolchain builds is something that is much, much, much different than an API change. So now I have to turn off this driver in my build. Issue, thanks. Okay, so he's saying the break was all driver, all builds versus some builds. Okay, I get it. I get this. Is kernel development hard? One would assume that it's hard for many reasons. As I've always been told from people that worked on, including from Glauber and Pekka, who maintained part of the Linux kernel for decades, would always say something along the lines of that if you plan out a feature, you should plan on years. You shouldn't plan on like weeks or months. So it's like a very large and difficult process to do things. It is a multi-year effort to do things in the Linux kernel. It is not a small it's not like a small change. PR takes months. Yeah. So it's a very serious thing, which Linux is a very slow repo, which is actually a good thing, by the way, right? Like, I don't think anyone should be upset that Linux takes a long time to make changes. The entire world runs off Linux. Like, people kind of forget that the greatest piece of software ever written is Linux. I don't care. Fight me on it. You could argue that perhaps some version of C and its compilation could be better, or SquealLite, but I think Linux is probably the greatest piece of software. I don't even think Git's the greatest piece of software. I don't think Git even falls within that line. I would argue Node.js. Okay, fair. Right? SquealLite is amazing. It's done a lot of stuff, but it's just not the same. Right? I think SquealLite is like a second tier. I think Git's a third tier. I just don't think you can beat it. Let's see the response here, because I think it's probably important to see the response. The response is this. Then I think we need a clear statement from Linus on how we will be working. Probably a good play here. I'd say this is probably a good play. If he is, if he is build testing Rust or not. Without that, I don't think the Rust team should be saying any change on the C side rests entirely on the Rust side's shoulders. It is clearly not the process if Linus is build testing Rust and rejecting PRs that fail to build. Yeah, it broke some builds. It sounded like a typical Rust build was not affected because it used the same version of Clang or C code and some bindgen. Linus was mixing GCC and Clang in his build. I tested this theory. Okay, so this is like a bunch of all this stuff. Okay, here we go. Okay, but this shouldn't be surprising. It didn't work like C. Rust builds the PCI binding always. Okay, so this is just more of that stuff. But either way, top level seems... I think this is probably the most reasonable take. If you don't want hundreds of emails of people arguing and becoming upset, it is probably best to set the exact expectation as opposed to trying to intuit the expectation from actions of Linus, right? No need to rediscover how physics works and come up with the equations. Like, perhaps we can just divine it by asking Linus. Probably the best way to go about this. All right, hold on. We do have one more Greg response. My 2 cents. If Linus doesn't pipe up with an authoritative answer to this thread, Miguel and the other Rust folks should just merge this series once it is reviewed and ready, ignoring Christoph's overt attempt at sabotaging the project. If Linus pulls it, what Christoph says, it doesn't matter. If Linus does it... So again, this is just trying to intuit what Linus's intentions are. It just feels crazy that you're trying to divine it, right? We should not be in the world of divining somebody's ideas. That can be easily written down. The R4L project is essentially dead until either Linus or Christoph makes a move. Everything else is beating around the bush. Rust folks, please don't waste your time in mental cycles on drama like this. It's not worth your time. Either Linus likes it or he doesn't. Everything else is distractions orchestrated by a subset of saboteurs, maintainers who are trying to demoralize you until you give up because they know they are going to be on the losing side of history sooner or later. No amount of sabotage from old entrenched maintainers is going to stop the world from moving forward towards memory-safe languages. For what it's worth, in my opinion, the cancer comment from Christoph would be enough to qualify for a code of conduct action, but I doubt anything of this sort will happen. Wow. That's okay, this guy, Hector! A little of it, I wouldn't call that vindictive. I think he's just probably tired of this. Like, can we just all be real here for a second? Imagine having to do this on, like, the Daily Slog. All right, so Linus does speak here. This was about you because typing a proper answer takes a bit longer. It was also about your tools on Fetty like this. It's only a joke, does not work with your public profile and following. I do not understand the frustration and temptation to just burn it all to the ground, heed the call of the sirens, or maybe for me, it's supposed to be heed, not head the call. Heed the call of the sirens. Or, by the way, again, another reference. This one would be the Odyssey. Okay, you swines. All right. But you can't have it both, let's see, and expect it also to be a part of and contributing to the same community. Personally, I don't appreciate getting drenched in gasoline while I'm trying to quench flames on the ground. Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously this was pretty intense to like whip out the cock, the code of conduct, and have it over the word cancer. I really do hope that Linux development isn't this sensitive to the point where if someone says cancer, doesn't mean, oh well, gosh, can you? I mean, that seems so wild. Like I just do hope that people are strong enough to be able to be like, no, that's way too intense. Come on, let's all like step it down, right? Get HR in here. And this isn't the first time or the second, but now it's pretty clear pattern over some years. And with the first, I would explain why you react like that, and you had my full understanding. But eventually, that runs a bit of an excuse. Okay, so this is just arguing. So we're just gonna skip over the arguing because I don't think the arguing is gonna be that great. But it does come. Let's see. Hold on. It does. Let's see. I just want to get some of the gist. So they're kind of arguing back and forth. Let's see. To back up SEMA, we don't need grandstanding, brigading, playing the crowd, streamer drama creation. Let's go. It's like they knew. This is crazy. Damn, skipped. We don't need that, dude. I did mentioned. I'm actually on the. By the way, I'm actually on this guy's team. You don't need to do the grandstanding. That's actually this is the part that I want to skip. I actually don't care about this part because I think this part's the most important. I'm just more curious about Linus. What does Linus have to say? Whoa. Okay. Hold on. I guess I'm a bit confused here. Yeah, this right here. I'm tired of seeing people get away with using words like cancer to describe others' works with zero repercussions. Let's see. If shaming on social media does not work, then tell me what does, because I'm out of ideas. I'm of the personal opinion that we should really not allow, okay, an unrestricted growth item that will end in disaster. If he were to say that instead of cancer, is that somehow okay? Right? It's kind of one of these things where it's like, I think we've become entirely too sensitive about words. Because if he would have said, I'm afraid that this thing is going to spread and cause a bunch of problems. I think he's tired. I think he's really tired. Honestly, I'm tired. But I feel bad for Hector. I think he's just, this has to be a horrible place to be. Trying to shoulder such a change through a bunch of different parties that either cheer you on or absolutely don't want it. Like, that's going to be that's a really hard place to be. Because you're getting cheered on, so you want to go harder, but you're constantly fighting, which is going to make you feel burnt out. Really, it just sounds like a recipe to be burnt out. This sounds like the same reason why in 2016 when I quit Netflix the first time, it was for this exact reason, being cheered on by some and being constantly in this fight with others. It just becomes this place where you just feel like you're going to you just get so burnt out, you want nothing to do with it. I totally get his frustration, and I get how hard it is. From Linus himself. If shaming on social media doesn't work, which by the way, shaming on social media, I do want to say that you should never do this. This is just not a great place to be, okay? I really am so sick of keyboard warriors. We just don't need that. How about you accept the fact that maybe the problem is you? You think you know better, but the current process works. It has problems, but problems are in fact of life. There is no perfect. By the way, this is actually a really great response right here, that there is no perfect. There is no easy answer to this. Linus should try to say what he thinks the rule should be and that there will be deviations from the rule, but nonetheless, there is no perfect way to go about this. However, I will say that social media brigading just makes me not want to have anything at all to do with your approach. I'm actually on that team. I hate social media brigading because if we have issues in the kernel development model, then social media sure as hell isn't the solution. The same way it sure as hell wasn't the solution in politics. What? You're telling me that social media isn't a great use of politics? What? Crazy? Crazy notion? Technical patches and discussions matter. Social brigading, no. Thank you. I don't know why he escaped K, but I'm glad we escaped the K. I don't know what that escape sequence means, but I'm sure it means something that makes perfect sense. This is awesome, by the way. This is beautiful. It's definitely harsh. This falls under the whole what I expect Linus to respond with. It's thank you / it means thank. Oh, it actually has a meaning. I didn't even know that. No, thank you. Is that what it means? All right. Key emails from the terminal. Yeah. But this is like what I consider a really great, I mean, in some sense, it's a really great response because it's like, hey, we have to keep these things very specific and technical. And I think that Christoph, though not a great, like not probably the most ideal argument, saying we don't want two different languages in a code base, is in some sense a argument over technical slash, communication problems. And I think Danilo was also doing a good job. But the whole like, hey, we should try to get this guy with a COC violation. Like I did agree that was just like it was not a great place to be. And so we'll skip the rest of this because I don't think we need to see just more arguments or affirmations or anything like that. I don't think it adds anything to this. So let's just go down the Hector Martin line and then see what Greg has to say. Greg responded to a very specific thing from Hector, which is, I do believe the fact that essentially all high-level kernel maintainers and contributors are paid by corporations to do it is a major factor. Okay, so let's look for that. Okay, so it's this one that he's responding to. Oh, and one last thing. I've heard that in whatever backroom conversations you've been having about this situation, there has apparently been a belief, explicit or implicit, that I am in any way employed to work on Linux kernel. Unlike most people in this thread, I don't enjoy the luxury of a cushy tech job that pays me to deal with this community. I am supported exclusively by donations, which incidentally have been steadily decreasing since the start of the Acai Linux project. The project has zero corporate sponsorship, which makes it super hard. By the way, I think you should take corporate sponsorships. You should rush as fast as you can to get corporate sponsorships. Like it's actually a really good. Yes, I did see this. I'm just not. We're just not going to go into the argument of all the social stuff because I just don't think it's very good. But people should. I do find this to be a pretty common theme among a lot of the Rust like higher ups, if you will, that there's this idea that corporate sponsorships or corporate is bad universally. But I don't think that's. I don't think having a corporate sponsorship to develop something is necessarily bad. You could argue that there's times where it's bad, right? I think that is pretty reasonable to say that, hey, there are ways in which it could be bad. But the universality of all marking all things that involve corporations as bad just feels a little bit odd. Like you could argue, like I would be under absolutely no. Like, I would not consider it bad for somebody if they said, hey, they don't want Palantir to sponsor them. And it's because they don't believe in the things Palantir are doing. Obviously, Palantir is a very, what's it called? We'll just at least say minimally at least a controversial company, or some people feel it's controversial. If that's the case, like, I could totally understand that. I wouldn't even be like, okay, hey, that's bad of you. All right, I get it. You feel this way. Not a big deal. But just like a universal blanket statement, I feel like that happens among a lot of Rust people, and I'm not sure if that's true. Maybe I'm misreading it, but I always feel like there's this whole corporate sponsorship, kind of like this very anti-commercialism to Rust. It probably was best shown in the original draft document for copyright and how intense they were about corporation and any form of corporate anything or commercial use. And I do believe the fact that essentially all high-level Linux kernel maintainers and contributors are paid by corporations to do it is a major factor that has caused this community to become widely out of touch with what it means to be a community FOSS project. I mean, to be completely fair when it comes to Linux, like, okay, so here's my problem. So I'm going to lay this out, and this is going to be a really hot take. I actually hate this sentence. It's not that I dislike it. I actually hate this sentence. And here's the reason why. You will see this continuously on social media, everywhere, which goes a little bit something like this. If corporations would just do their fair share and sponsor open source instead of just using it and not giving back to the community, I think it's completely bad. And I think they're completely bad for doing that. But then, at the same time, you can make a statement saying, hey, if corporations are willing to put hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably more, per year to have somebody work full-time on a free and open source project, then it's somehow put into a negative light. Like, I don't understand. If you say this, that corporations should give more, then they give in the value of expertise, hiring, maintaining, administration, HR, the whole 9 yards. It's like, that's a really great, like that. This is a good thing. I think we should all be pretty happy that corporations, many corporations, not just one. So it's not just like it's only Google that's the one sponsoring. Like, it's a bunch of corporations. So at least minimally, we know that it's moving forward. That's good for all servers as opposed to like just Google and what Google wants. It actually is like, to me, this just feels like, oh, so you you did it. You didn't do it. You didn't do it good enough. Like, I think of that one time. I forget who did this against Jared Bunn. But Jared Bunn, Jared Sumner, Jared Bunn Jared, who was like something about Zig. And then someone was like, oh yeah, you do all this open source stuff, but you never give back. You are a bad person. And he goes, I give to both Zig Foundation and Zig Tooling. I give $5,000 a month to just Zig Tooling. And then they literally respond, oh yeah, but you took VC money. It's not enough. It's like, oh, you don't do it? No, actually, I do it. Oh, you don't do it enough to what I think you should do it to. And so it just feels like no matter what you do, you fail. This should be, I mean, in my head, I think that this is a fairly good thing because it's not one company. It's like genuinely tens, if not 20s, 50s, hundreds of companies that give to Linux engineering effort so that they can represent best all of what everybody needs. Then eventually you do it too much and now you're trying to control it. Exactly. Like, I don't know what the perfect thing is supposed to be. There are a ton of corporation sponsorship behind Rust. Oh, yes, there are. There's tons of it. There's tons of corporate sponsorship as well. So it's just like, I don't really feel like, I just hate this statement because I don't feel like it's very, like, I feel like this is just like the whole discourse problem. If you want corporations to contribute, then when they do, we should try to encourage and celebrate that so that they are encouraged and do it more, not the opposite. I don't understand it. Because I want corporations to contribute more to open source. I think more money should be spent, more engineering time, and more effort. I think it would be very, very good. Right? I think it would be a really good thing. All right, so now that we got that, let's see what he has to say. Please note that ever since I started keeping track of this type of thing, way back in 2003 or so, it has been the case that over 80% of the contributions come from company-funded developers, which means it really goes back before that as well. And that's good. It means that we have a backing to do this properly from the companies that benefit from it. To not have that would make it much harder for any of this to work properly at all. So don't try to play the you all work for companies card. That isn't going to fly, and as obviously as we speak for ourselves here, and our companies know that we can't tell us what to do, and they give us insight into the problems that they have with Linux in order for us to help change it to make it better for everyone. Because again, everyone has the same problems, individuals and companies. So solving it for one group solves it for everyone. I'm totally on Greg's team. Okay, I don't know who Hector is. It sounds like he's just been beaten down. Sounds like he's having a hard time. I hope that if for whatever reason someone's takeaway from this is that you should like make fun of Hector, is probably not the right move. I may not like his statement, but I'm sure he's just been beaten down and he's just frustrated, and it's all coming out. Like, dude, if you've been married, you totally understand this, right? You've just been absolutely destroyed. He may be a weird actor. I'm just trying to read the guy in the best light, okay? You know, I really do think that we could be a much better internet community and a tech community if we give everybody a bit more grace, even if they don't give grace to us. And I always think about this one person on the internet. I'm not going to say his name, though me and him are buds, and I actually think he's a great guy. But I remember during the time that I got into the Node trouble, he lashed out and he said some pretty tough stuff to me. I believe I've said some not nice things back to him because I was just like, what the heck is this guy doing? I don't believe I behaved myself perfectly either, right? So I'm not like just heaping it all on him. But nonetheless, totally just went like out of his way to comment on everything I did, trying to get after me. And so then eventually I just blocked him. And then later he reached out through a separate account, just said, hey, I was going through some stuff. I would just like to say sorry about this stuff. Immediately went straight in and said, you know what, forgive you, unblock you. Let's do this. Let's be friends instead of having a bad time. Hey, and I'm sorry for any of the things I did too. And I just want to let you know, like, we got to win this together. Let's make a good community. Let's not make a shitty community. And I'm fully 100% on board to always attempt to make things better, because I do really feel like we've gotten to a point where the tech community is like turning into like the makeup community, where it's just like my wife follows some of the drama that goes on the makeup community, and she just tells me like it's wild. I don't want us to be like a TikTok community. I want us to be a good community. Can you guys not talk mean about Theo? Like, dude, I'm literally talking about how we should be like nice about stuff, and people's response is to start pointing out other people. Like, let's be a good community, right? So that's my only takeaway, is that I can severely dislike this statement, and I think it's ignorant and silly. But at the exact same time, I feel bad for Hector because he's probably been pushed in 1,000 different ways that we're just not even aware of. Regardless of what he does in his activism and social side / what he does on the internet, including shaming people on social media, which I think is a very low way to go about stuff, we can still be better and say, hey, guy's probably having a hard time. We feel bad. So yeah, there you go. This is the Rust. This is the problem of Rust. So I think this truly just shows the problem of Rust. Rust in Linux is going to be an impossible project, it seems like. It seems like this has to be a generational project, meaning that it literally has to phase people out. It's going to be a 25-year-long project to really set in. So to me, again, this just says one simple fact to me, because I haven't read any of these. I never read the Linux stuff. I only read it when they kicked out Russians. I think that was the only other time I ever read the Linux mailing list. I know it has an abbreviation. I can't even remember it. So I technically don't ever do any of the, I'm just not really on these ones. But to me, it says one thing, which is that if the Rust community was serious about this, you just got to fork and you just got to do it yourselves, or you just got to spend 25 years. Like which one is worth it? 25 years of lots of fighting and slowly winning over many, many years, or just doing it yourself, right? 25 to life. It's the big bitch, as they call it. I'll get started now. I know. I mean, that's how I look at it. Hector is a 10x dev for Linux kernel. Today is a bad day. Yeah, I do agree that people say he's a Chad, so I bet you he is truly a Chad. And so I just feel bad for the guy, right? Anyways, the big bitch was my nickname in high school. 25 to life, the big bitch, Dan Vale. By the way, Dan, I don't know if you saw, I had a sweet short in there. Did you see that? I'm hoping that we pick up the short with me talking about butt plug. The name is React truly is the butt plug operating system, but Jen.